Well, thank you very much and good evening to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to our sponsors as well, First Equity, and also thank you to Cameron for giving the lead into gold and perhaps to Ariana Resources. And of course, going from the exciting world of new digital gold to the old world of gold in Turkey. Now, Ariana has been operating in Turkey for 14 years, initially as an exploration company, but we brought the company all the way through to a producing gold asset. The usual disclaimer, don't need to dwell on that. Move straight on to the summary of where we find ourselves currently. We are in production in our joint venture in Western Turkey. This is at the Red Rabbit Gold Project. This is located about 2.5 hours drive to the northeast of Izmir. So a very easy access. And of course, Western Turkey is a very benign operating environment. We are in joint venture with Prosir Construction, a Turkish partnership involved in gold and silver processing plant EPCM. This partnership has worked very well because, of course, we're providing the expertise when it comes to resource development. They're providing the engineering expertise and indeed the financial backing in order for us to bring the Kızıltepe mine into production, which achieved production in March of last year. So since first production, we have now produced over 15,000 ounces of gold as at the end of this last quarter, with revenue of just over $21 million US. Most importantly, our cash costs are industry leading. They're in the lowest 30% globally. It's also worthwhile just dwelling on the track record that we have in Turkey. I have indicated that we've been there for very many years, but the most important phase, I suppose, for our development was the 6 years that we spent in partnership with Prosir, bringing the company through to operational stage. So really, this is a story all about the full exploration and development cycle, which we're planning to achieve in further development projects, particularly at the Tavşan location, which is also part of the Red Rabbit Gold Project. So we're currently targeting about 20,000 ounces of gold production per annum. Once we bring Tavşan on stream in the course of the next few years, we're planning to increase that total output to 50,000 ounces. But in addition to that, we have the Salinbas Gold Project located in northeastern Turkey, which is the most significant individual resource in our portfolio, and I'll talk about that in further slides. We also had a very brief foray into energy and technology metals through our Australian subsidiary, Asgard Metals. We did very well out of that, from a $30,000 investment by Ariana into a number of lithium assets. We turned that into $3.5 million, which we've now cashed out of. We are a very attractive investment. There's no debt at the group level. All the debt is housed in the joint venture company level related to that Red Rabbit Gold Project. We are now benefiting from cash flow from the Kızıltepe gold mine in repayment of loans that we've made into the joint venture company over the course of the years that we were moving into production. There is significant potential for further production growth, as I've indicated, but in addition to that, further resource growth, both within the Red Rabbit area, but also across our other assets, particularly at Salinbas. We have very robust project stakeholders, this from the local level, the local communities, and I'll talk about them in a bit more detail later, all the way through to the Turkish government and indeed our loyal shareholders that have been with us all those years. Turkey, of course, is a very benign operating environment. It's a mining-friendly jurisdiction with the government strongly supporting mining, very specifically with various government incentive schemes focused exclusively on that sector, and I'll talk about that in further detail as we go through the presentation. Here's some summary statistics on the company. 15 million market capitalization currently. A little bit about the board of directors would probably be helpful. My background, I'm a geologist. I'm also half Turkish, so I speak Turkish fluently. I was born there, I grew up there partly, but as you can tell from my accent, most of my time has been spent here in the UK. Although the doctor in front of my name actually I owe to Perth, Australia. Michael de Villiers, our Executive Chairman, wealth of experience as a mining company director. He's an accountant by background, but he's worked for a number of the large mining firms around the world, but particularly in Africa. And he's been with Ariana Resources since 2005, our IPO. William Payne is our CFO, also an accountant. He runs a top 20 financial accounting firm in London. And Chris Sangster, our mining engineer, again, a wealth of experience, and also previously a director and indeed CEO of Scott Gold. A large chunk of our current shareholding is that 10% there is made up of management specifically. So very quickly, peer group comparison before I delve into the meat of the presentation. This is a very useful slide because it just shows how we perform with a number of other companies that are similar in one form or another to Ariana. Centamin, taking the top one, of course not similar in terms of size, but in terms of area, geographically. They're in Egypt, we're in Turkey. And very interestingly, around early 2016, both our share prices tick off together, and indeed they track one another bizarrely over that period of time. Hummingbird in West Africa, but a useful one to compare ourselves to because also they've recently gone into gold production. And you can see their relative performance there as well. Vast in Zimbabwe, producing a similar amount of gold to us in terms of annual production through their venture in Zimbabwe, but also they're in Romania. So again, some geographical similarity to Ariana. Kefi were in Turkey at one point, but they're now in Saudi Arabia and of course in Ethiopia. So again, some geographic similarity. And Stratex, who were a producer of gold in Turkey until relatively recently, but now going back into exploration. So it's useful just seeing how Ariana performs over time relative to some of those peers. So why are we in Turkey to begin with? Well, Turkey straddles part of the Tethyan metallogenic belt, which is an extremely prospective zone of gold mineralization and indeed base metal mineralization, very akin to the western seaboard of the Americas. So associated with porphyry, copper gold systems, VMS systems, and indeed epithermal systems. And it's the epithermal systems that we were originally focused on over here in Area 2 in Western Turkey, which has become the Red Rabbit Gold Project and a number of satellite projects thereafter. But Area 1 is the Salinbas Project area, which we originally had in joint venture with Eldorado Gold until late 2016. And we acquired their stake for a 2% net smelter return royalty. So I'll take you on a journey initially up to northeastern Turkey, and then I'll swing back to the revenue generation at Red Rabbit. The other important point about Turkey, before I move on, is that it is the largest gold producer in Europe. It outstrips the combined production of a number of other countries that are in that top range. And there are 13 active gold mines in Turkey currently. It's the most active gold mining scene anywhere else in Europe. So moving on to northeastern Turkey, as you can see, very mountainous terrain here, very alpine. We're at about 1,250 meters or so where this drill was located. The Salinbas Project, so I'll just move around here so I can look at the slide itself. So we're located in this corridor that we refer to as the Hot Gold Corridor that runs up from the Hot Maden discovery down in the south. The Hot Maden discovery was made by the Lydia Mariana joint venture a few years ago. Major copper gold system. This corridor seems to be a structural control, and we've got most of this area under license. Our own discovery, the Arda copper gold porphyry and indeed the Salinbas gold silver zone is what we're primarily focused on, but there are a whole bunch of other prospective zones within that area that we're also following up on. Hot Maden was sold relatively recently part of it was sold to Sandstorm Gold for a $175 million deal. That was for 30% stake in the project that Mariana had. We have completed a scoping study on the Salinbas part of this system. So this is a smaller part of the overall system based on this 650,000 ounce JORC resource in indicated and inferred categories. But there are other resources in the area, notably at Ardala, which is the copper gold molybdenum porphyry. The scoping study demonstrated the project has an economic core. We believe strongly that there's a lot of exploration upside, and I'll demonstrate some of that exploration upside in the coming slides. So this map again shows a little bit more granularity, I suppose, to the geology. Here's the Ardala porphyry shown in pink, the Salinbas gold-silver zone shown in yellow. All the red dots shown there are the other gold targets that we've identified primarily within the corridor. A lot of these areas still need to be chased up, but there's a whole cluster of them that's located around the porphyry zone. So zooming in on that specifically, here's the porphyry again, which itself is mineralized, but then on one flank of that, on the western side, we have the Salinbas gold-silver zone. Now we believe that that zone, it's a gently dipping zone that dips away from topography just slightly, but it appears to wrap round along that dotted line to the north. We made the discovery just late last year of Salinbas North and Ardala North over here. So we're convinced now that that mineralized plain is consistent all the way through there. So we're planning a drilling program to test that. The distance between there and there is about 850 meters. So a significant zone represents exploration and indeed resource upside. So we're firmly convinced now that we're looking at a potentially multi-million ounce system, but with an economic core there at Salinbas that we've undertaken scoping on. So moving on now to the revenue generating part of our business, the Red Rabbit joint venture, which we hold in a 50-50 partnership with Procea Construction. We went into production in March of last year. These figures basically take us to the end of last year, so they're different to the figures that I showed in the earlier slide. But the important things, of course, are to point out the cash cost. This last quarter, we achieved a cash cost of $612 per ounce. So this is an all-in effective local operating cost for the joint venture production. That's inclusive of all the royalties and taxes and so on. There's a lot of exploration upside and further resource growth that we see in and around Kızıltepe, and I'll talk you through some aspects of that in future slides. We're effectively working to what was the definitive feasibility study, although most importantly the processing capacity, although the plant was designed to produce at 150,000 tonnes of ore per annum, we're actually taking that well above 180,000 tonnes of ore per annum currently. The in-pit grades that we're seeing also are effectively we're mining at higher grade than expected at this point in time, which is a fantastic position to be in. So this image shows the mine site. Over here is the processing plant. It's a conventional crush, then grind through a ball mill into a CIL processing plant there. The main pit that we're working to is this one, is the Arzu South pit. That has another couple of years of life to it. And then over the hill, just here, we have the Arzu North area. Now, it's important to stress that this mine site is staffed almost entirely by local people. So these are individuals that we've hired from the local villages here, Yusufcan village, another village just off the map here, as well as the local town here in Sındırgı. Some of the engineer class, they've come from further afield, be it Istanbul or Ankara, but everyone lives and works here. So we've got 175 Turkish staff on site. Hence, we have very strong community support for this joint venture operation, and indeed a significant amount of government support, both at the local government level as well as central government. We received strategic investment status for the operation a couple of years ago before we brought the project into construction. Those incentives are highly significant. So to give you an example, corporate tax has been reduced from 20% to 2% in the early years of the operation. The Turkish government also pays the social insurance costs of all mine employees. So that's for 175 people. They pay the social insurance costs for all mine employees for 7 years of mine life. So that's basically most of the mine life as resources and reserves currently stand. There's customs duty exemption, VAT exemption if not rebate. There's also an interest rate support mechanism, so we receive money from the Turkish government to help us pay what's effective interest to the bank loans. On that, we have a $33 million construction capital loan with a Turkish bank, Türkiye Finans. By the end of June, we'd have paid about a third of that off. So we're paying off this debt very, very quickly. Moving on to the resource and exploration upside. Won't go through this in a huge amount of detail. Suffice to say that the veins are shown here in this 3D model in yellow. The pits that we're currently working to shown in blue. So this is the one they're currently mining, Arzu South. The last whittle optimization that we did to demonstrate what part of those veins are economically extractable, we can show in red there. So we've demonstrated that the current resource will ultimately lead into a larger expanded mine life. We're also showing significant further exploration upside through our JORC exploration target. And this is where all the upside is, all these veins that remain to be drill tested. All the drilling you can see with these little dots here, look like frog spawn. But all the way along here remains to be drill tested. Between here and here, we've demonstrated that that vein system continues. So perhaps we'll go to an underground mining situation once we've exhausted the open pits. Moving on to the Tavşan site. Now this is also within the Red Rabbit joint venture, so also 50% owned with Prosea Construction. The plan here is to bring this into production over the course of the next couple of years, producing at a rate of about 30,000 ounces of gold per annum. We've already completed a revision to the JORC resource very recently to take the resource to measured, indicated, inferred categories, and this will catapult us now into a formal feasibility study, an environmental impact assessment, and indeed the permitting process that goes along with these things. So we're very encouraged with this project because, as you can see, the financials look very attractive indeed. And this is where the potential lies. All the red blobs on this map are basically the gold and indeed some silver mineralization. And unlike Kızıltepe, which is a steeply dipping vein system, in this case all the mineralization basically sits on the top of the hill. It's an epithermal system, but it's developed within a particular geological unit that we refer to as jasperoid. So in this particular case, the open pits here, and you can just make it out in that small diagram here, are going to be very shallow indeed. Only about 10-20 meters maximum depth. Very low strip ratio, almost no strip ratio in certain areas, but over life of mine, perhaps a 2-to-1 strip. So from a mining risks perspective, this is a great project. So what are we planning to do in the year ahead or the remainder of this year? Obviously continue to demonstrate operational improvements at the Red Rabbit project, particularly Kızıltepe mine. We've gone from strength to strength. Every quarter we report another improvement. We've been consistently reporting above feasibility expectations over the course of the last 3 quarters. We're also going to start looking at the potential for underground mining in the future, as I've indicated. We're also in the process of permitting for further pits. Some of those pits that I showed you over the hill, they need to be brought into the EIA framework, which has now happened, but also the associated permitting. And we'll start mining those perhaps from the end of this year into next year. And at Tavşan, well, we have completed the resource estimate. We're moving into that feasibility study in EIA and indeed associated permitting. And we're also starting some initial discussions with the lenders. So most probably with Türkiye Finans again, I can say, to lend against this particular construction project as well. And I'll leave you on that slide, which just summarises everything that I've said, and I invite questions. Thank you very much.